It is such a pleasure to be here with you today and to be adding my voice to the chorus of strong voices and powerful stories that are part of this conference. The sharing and witnessing of one another's lived experiences in all of its messiness and complexity is powerful, powerful medicine, especially in a world that centers airbrushed beauty, superficial connection, and positive vibes only spiritual guidance. While the details of each of our stories are completely unique, there is a shared quality, a universal resonance, a reflection of the collective experience in every tale ever woven. Gatherings like this are potent reminder that we are never, ever truly alone. And I sincerely hope that you're able to really feel into that for yourself as you listen to what all of us have to say in the coming days and the preceding days. My path back to myself has been a little unconventional, having taken place largely in front of the backdrop of a 20-year career in the Marine Corps. I enlisted in the Marine Corps right after high school. So when all of my classmates, or many of my classmates, were heading off to their first semester of college, I was headed to stand on the yellow footprints at boot camp. And anyone looking at my story from the outside might think it to be kind of shiny and perfect, maybe even enviable. A successful career with an interesting job, supportive, loving husband, 2 healthy children, financial security, a home, good health, so on and so on, right? The American dream. And yet, inside of that life, I often felt miserable. I felt small, uncertain, unseen, alone, and deeply, deeply sad. I was certain that there was something wrong with me. How could I have all of these things, all of these markers of success and happiness, and not be happy? I felt broken. I felt like a fraud. And I lived in fear of being found out as the imposter I believed myself to be. Time and again, when I needed myself the most, when I needed me to have my own back, to be my own friend and source of support, I did not, or maybe could not, show up for myself. In walking out the stories of my culture, my community, my lineage, my ancestry, without much question, I abandoned myself time and again. I'd like to be able to tell you that my retirement from the Marine Corps in 2011 marked the end of my self-abandonment, but it did not. The Marine Corps was never the problem. It merely provided me an excellent reason to continue to allow harmful and unfulfilling patterns of thought, patterns of movement, patterns of feeling to express through me and into the world and into my life. It did, however, mark the end of the access to a long list of convenient things outside of myself that I could blame for how lost and listless and dissatisfied I felt. So I'd like to take a moment here for us all to kind of center in to ourselves. Before I continue, I want to recognize that it can be activating to listen to someone else's story. That sometimes in listening to the details of someone else's story, a charge that we're unaware of can rise within us and we can feel ourselves closing off, pulling back, or starting to feel agitated. And so I'd like to just all take a pause right here, right now, to center back into our own bodies and our own breath. If you like, you can place one or both hands over your heart. Maybe close your eyes if you feel safe to do so. And just feel your breath. Feel yourself right here in time and space where you are. Feel into the warmth, the pressure, the comfort of your hand on your chest. And let it bring you a greater sense of safety, comfort, ease, and presence with yourself in this moment. Let it remind you that you are safe as yourself with yourself, right here, right now. Let any charge be present if it wants to stay present, and allow it to dissipate or dissolve if it wants to dissipate or dissolve. Lovely. Let's take one more nice deep breath together, inhaling and letting it all out. Yeah. Thank you. I think I needed that. So you may be wondering how my path goes from active duty Marine Corps to energetic, intuitive, and spiritual mentor. And all I can tell you is it's a slow, subtle, and sometimes painful shift that is ongoing today. I don't believe that there is a destination. It has been my experience so far that I may never arrive at any special place in this journey. And this is how my work has come to be, is how I've come to understand both my personal journey and my professional work as the spiral path of soul sovereignty. It's not a linear experience. I am a cyclical creature. I move with the seasons, and so do you. So do we all. So I want to share with you that besides or in parallel to the Marine Corps, a powerful force operating in the background of my life has been the deep wisdom tradition of yoga. Yoga was the place where I first felt free to kind of feel into the stories that I was carrying, the narratives I was allowing to express into my life, and all the ways that I was showing up in the world. It was the first place where I felt free to kind of lovingly question myself and say, in Byron Katie's words, is this true? Just because I thought it did not turn out to be that it was true. So I was first introduced to yoga in my mid-20s. And from there, I had kind of an on again, off again relationship to yoga. I came to yoga through asana practice first, and then through the rest of the 8 limbs, if you will, the broad breadth and both depth of the wisdom tradition. And it really wasn't until my early 30s when I had added the new roles of wife and mother to my life that I really started to have a more dedicated relationship with yoga. I was finding that the expectations of mother and wife were often in direct contrast to the demands of my profession, this life that I had built for myself up until then. At this point, I am halfway through a 20-year military career, halfway plus through a 20-year military career. And the misalignment was causing a greater and greater sense of dissonance and friction within me. The carefully managed persona that I had created to navigate a successful military career was just not up to the task of being wife and mother. Slowly, the illusion of a compartmentalized self began to crumble, and I was confronted time and again with the unsustainable nature of the choices I had made to this point. Choices I'd made to split myself off into good and bad, into acceptable and not acceptable, into what I chose to present to the world and who my real self was. I realized that I wasn't even sure that I knew anymore who my real self was. And that's a really difficult insight to arrive to. And it was an insight, I think, that I arrived at long before I was able or willing to really put anything in motion in my life, until I was really willing or able, had the capacity perhaps, to let the ripples of that energetic insight, that ripple in the pond of my being, if you will, vibrate all the way out to my physical world and out into expression in my life. It was yoga's message of oneness that began to break through the noise of the life I had led up until then, of the stories I had told myself, of the burden of those stories and those ideas that I just clung to. I just kept walking out, even though I knew in my heart of hearts that they were harmful and not reflective of who I truly was. This was happening, somewhat unbeknownst to my conscious self. And so as I approached retirement from the Marine Corps, I found myself really leaning in to yoga as a balancer for the more linear, hierarchical, externally focused elements that existed and had honestly dominated most of my life till that point. And I began to find some respite there. So I followed the Western model and I attended a yoga teacher training. Yeah. Not so much to become a yoga teacher. That was not a vision I held for myself. It was more about deepening my connection to this deep wisdom that I just knew was there, that I could feel was there, the presence of which I was so aware of, but couldn't quite grasp or pull down and allow to express fully into my life. I had no intention to become a spiritual leader. I had no intention to develop my intuition, to lean into my empathy or my skills as an empath. None of it. This was not the place I find myself today was never a destination that I set myself for. And it has unfolded and continues to unfold beautifully, sometimes despite myself. Yoga opened the door to freedom within myself. And it's a door that I have to walk through again and again and again. It's a choice I get to make, a threshold I get to cross again and again and again. And sometimes I find that really frustrating. I'll be honest. Sometimes I don't find the joy in finding myself kind of here again. Didn't I already cross this threshold? Haven't I already done this? And the answer is yes. Yes, you have. And there's more to learn. There's more to express about yourself. There's more to connect to. There's maybe more to release, let go of. More tower moments yet to come, if you're familiar with the tarot deck. Nonetheless, the truth is that as hard as I work to remember myself, I am even more an accomplished master at forgetting. So let's pause again to reconnect back to ourselves. You're hearing my story. We're here together. But let's take a moment to come back to our individual breath, our individual bodies. You might place one or both hands over your heart again if you find that supportive. And just breathe into what is arising for you. Breathe into what is falling away. Honor what you do not yet have the capacity to hear, the capacity to be with or accept or integrate. There is nothing wrong with the way you are experiencing me telling my story. There is nothing wrong with you. There is nothing wrong with the way you are experiencing me telling my story. Please trust yourself above all else. You are the way shower within yourself. Your inner guidance system is always talking to you, always ready to point you in the direction of home. So let's just breathe into that. Whatever of that you can take on board. Let's take one more nice deep breath in. And slow, steady exhale. Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. And so in time, these patterns that I've been walking out, these stories, these narratives, they bring me to the brink. And these harmful ideas of productivity and success, they just kept bumping up against my blossoming sense and understanding and growing understanding, perhaps, of divine timing and wholeness. And so I was struggling. I was struggling under the weight of the narratives I had not yet shed, and the joy and peace and power that I could feel were possible within me, and I could just not yet anchor into with any sort of regularity or any sense of deep intention or consciousness. Ultimately, I found myself in crisis, like so many of us do. What brings us to the final threshold? I can't even, I have to walk that back because I can't even tell you for sure that this is the final threshold for me. I do know that this was a major threshold for me. And I honor in hindsight that there were so many smaller, perhaps, but no less significant thresholds that I had crossed in order to arrive to the place where I was, I don't know if I want to say prepared, but yeah, prepared, ready, right? Within me, if not consciously aware of it, right? Unconsciously, deep within me, my higher self, my inner knowing, that sovereign soul that sits on the throne at the very center of my heart, the way back home had been prepared. Bricks had been laid, a foundation had been set, and a path had been cleared. However tenuous that path was, the path had been cleared by a series of smaller and no less significant thresholds that I had allowed myself to cross. All those times I referred to earlier that I had consciously or unconsciously chosen to walk through the door to freedom within myself that yoga had opened for me, that my spiritual inquiry had opened for me, that my teachers had opened for me, that honestly my own, what we would often refer to as bad choices, but in the wisdom of hindsight, I could see that they were the only choices. They were the best choices at the time. All of those things brought me to a place where I watched through that open door to freedom within myself again and again and again and again. And then I kind of arrived at this watershed moment. I've come to refer to this part of my process as my breakdown to breakthrough portion of my personal process. Perhaps you're familiar with it or with this idea. But at this point, the decline in my mental and physical health brought me to a full stop. And it ultimately, it helped me to come to a place where the discomfort of my continued bondage and the related depression and anxiety and chronic pain and poor sleep and all of the things exceeded the fear of the unknown expanse within me. It was at this point that I gave myself full permission to begin to wiggle free. I think also incredibly important to mention here is that this was the time, this was the moment, and it wasn't a single moment. It was a series of moments. I resisted and I cried, and I would get back up and I would dust myself off and I would start again, and I would resist and I would cry and I would get back up and I would dust myself off and I would start again. So this was not a single moment in time. It continues to not be a single moment in time years later, if I'm completely honest and transparent with you. And what became apparent to me by the time I had this like puddle on the floor, who the hell is that in the mirror kind of moment, was that living according to the rules and expectations of the outside world, living out the stories and narratives of my culture, my community, my ancestry, was causing me real, deep harm. And that these were choices that I was making, that ultimately I held the keys to the cage of my own imprisonment, and that I am the active co-author in my story, if I so choose to be. I committed at that moment to finding another way to be in the world, another way to be with myself, guided by my inner guidance system and utterly devoted to being in loving and honest relationship with myself. My guiding mantra for the last 7 years, maybe, has been complete and utter devotion to being in loving and honest relationship with myself. Questions I ask myself include things like, am I using this to love myself? This thought, this action, this choice, this place I keep showing up to in my life, my business, my work, all of it. Am I using this to love myself, or am I using this to bully myself? Because the bullying of myself, the abandoning of myself, the betrayal of myself, right? That was my lived pattern for a really long time. And so I have to check in with myself on a regular basis, because that pattern is really easy to slip back into. This is the new way, right? The loving myself is the new way, the new pattern, the new path that I am carving out for myself. And I really have to honor that it continues to take time and devotion, intention and conscious devotion to stepping back on that path as often as I need to. Whenever I realize I've wandered back off, whenever I think it's Dr. Joe Dispenza that talks about the deep grooves in the record, right? And the needle kind of sliding back into those deep grooves. And what we're doing when we are consciously stepping into our spiritual path, when we're consciously walking this spiral path of soul sovereignty home to ourselves, is we're saying, I choose to walk this path with love. And so effectively, we're taking the needle out of the deep groove that's in the record, and we're starting new grooves. And when crisis comes, when the unexpected arrives, when things don't go to plan, the needle slides back into that deep groove sometimes. And there'll come a point where we're like, wait a minute. I know this song. This is not the soundtrack of my life that I choose anymore. We catch ourselves, we take a deep breath, and as best we can, we love ourselves as we pick up the needle and set it back into the groove that we are trying to deepen. our chosen groove, that place where we're walking hand in hand with the divine. Yeah, hand in hand with the divine, hand in hand with ourselves, with love and kindness and devotion. Yeah. The truth is that I don't ever want to look in the mirror again and feel as though a stranger is looking back at me. Will I achieve that? I don't know. I really don't know. I hope so. So far, so good. um, and it's okay. It's okay. It's okay if I catch glimpses out of the corner of my eye and I'm like, who's that? Because I know the way back. I know the way back, and I trust myself to get back on that path. What I do know is that I am learning to love myself through life unfolding, to challenge the bullying thoughts and perspectives instead of believing them and allowing them to express into my life. I am learning to move at the speed of both trust and my capacity, to release the lure of toxic productivity and do more thinking, and to let my pace be just right for me. I'm learning to trust myself. I'm learning to trust myself, to trust life, and to trust others, and to practice discernment in all of that. I'm learning to rise to my full height and use the full resonance of my voice and my being in support of myself and who and what is dear to me. I'm learning to let myself be loved, supported, held, and celebrated in all of my many forms and states, my messiness and my complexity, my perfection and my polished. I'm learning to see my sensitivity, my heart, my intuition, and my instinct to care and nurture as the true source of my personal power, instead of as the liability I believed them to be for so long. And maybe most importantly, I am learning to live as the full spectrum being that I am at my center. I am learning. I am walking the spiral path of my own soul sovereignty every single day in the very best way I know how. And it's not perfect. And yet it is. Yeah, it's not perfect, and yet it is. It is my life unfolding and me honoring my experience of my life unfolding that puts me in ever closer contact to my true essence, the truth of who I am. And that's a belief that I hold for everyone else. Every one of you listening to this, everyone in your lives, everyone in the world, the earth herself, honestly, right? She's never been wrong. She's always walked her perfect path. But our relationship to one another, to life, to ourselves. I trust, or I'm learning. I'm learning to trust. I'm learning to walk. I'm learning to let the messiness and the complexity, the paradoxes of being both wonderfully lit up in the world and deeply, deeply saddened. The paradox of being both angry and joyful. Of seeing exactly what we're all capable of, the good, the bad, the indifferent, and then wondering what makes them good, bad, and indifferent. But that's a talk for an entire other day. I am holding this belief for each and every one of us, even if you don't feel like you're in a position right now to hold this belief for yourself, that you are on the spiral path to your own soul sovereignty, that you are walking the journey home to yourself, if you are not ready to kind of hold that belief for yourself, to take it on board, then I am happy to hold it for you. I'm happy to walk alongside you for a while as you start to believe it for yourself. Because I trust you to believe it for yourself. I trust you to walk your journey. Yeah. So I would like to end our time together in a way that I often end my time with others. And that is with a guided meditation practice. You do not need any prior experience with meditation for this practice to be incredibly meaningful to you. And I always like to end with a practice to kind of smooth any feathers that were ruffled in our time together. Essentially, this supports the central nervous system it supports central nervous system regulation, co-regulation for all of us. And the more regulated and flexible that we can all feel in ourselves and in our central nervous systems, the freer, the more spacious and expansive we're able to show up in the world. It really does help us to settle into a sense of curiosity. So if you'll join me, if you are in a space right now listening to this where you can stop and close your eyes, feel free to be seated or lying down or standing, whatever body position works for you. And then if it's comfortable, close your eyes. If not, allow your eyes to stay open, but see if you can just kind of soften your face. If you can let your gaze come to rest really softly on something. A little bit in the distance, not too far off, but not too close either. If it felt good to you in our previous somatic breaks to kind of place one or both hands on your heart, feel free to do that. And let's begin by just tuning into the slow, steady rhythm of the breath. Whatever slow and steady means to you right now. It does not have to align to slow and steady in my breath or the other person's breath. This is you. What is your breath? Just let yourself observe it. Feel the breath enter the body. Feel the breath exit. Begin to notice how the body just naturally moves to make space for the breath. You don't have to think about it, work hard, do anything at all. You're free to just observe and breathe. The body breathing, you here in the present moment. Take a moment to become aware of your body here in time and space. Notice all the points of contact that you have with the earth beneath you. That might be in the form of a chair. It might be the bottoms of your feet touching a floor or the grass. It might be the whole back of your body if you're lying down. Just notice where your body, your earth element, is touching an expression of earth, if not the earth directly. And see if with the next 3 exhales, you can just kind of allow your body to sink a little, release a little bit more into that support. If you can let yourself kind of give yourself over to being held and supported by the ground beneath you, whether that's in the form of a chair, earth, floor, bed, couch. Can you surrender the effort of holding yourself up just a little bit more than the previous breath? Can you feel into being held, being supported? Good. Now let your attention come back to the slow, steady rhythm of your breath. And just observe the breath in the body, not from outside of yourself, but from a place within you. If you imagine that your attention, your awareness is a flashlight that you're accustomed to kind of pointing outward, like the bat signal, the giant light there at Gotham, kind of spin that light and turn it within yourself and experience yourself from within. Body and breath, you here in the present moment with yourself. It's okay if this is a little uncomfortable. Bring your awareness back to your breath or back to your hand on your heart. Maybe you have a pillow or a beloved companion animal nearby that your hand can rest on, where you can find comfort and support, a little extra layer. It's okay for you to be experiencing this practice exactly as you are experiencing it. Not how I lead it or guide it, not based on my suggestions, but honoring whatever is coming forward for you, whatever is falling away for you, whatever is happening within you, around you. Let's rest in that for just 3 to 5 more breaths. Awareness of ourselves here in the present moment. And after those 3 to 5 breaths, and when this feels complete to you, take a moment to express gratitude in the way that feels most natural, most authentic and genuine for you. And then let your awareness begin to come back to the surface, noticing your breath and your body, not just from the inside, but the feel of the air on your skin, the movement of the breath in and out of your nostrils, maybe the play of light and shadow beyond your closed eyes. Come back to yourself here in time and space, still noticing that connection within as you bring your awareness, your consciousness back to the outside world. When you're ready, opening your eyes to a soft gaze and joining me back here in this moment, in this space. Thank you all so much for the opportunity to share my story, a little about my path, my journey, and kind of where it's led me in my work. It has been an incredible joy for me to be with you here today. And as a special gift for your attention, for your witnessing, for our time together, I've created a guided meditation to support you in connecting even deeper with your inner world and all aspects of yourself. You can visit the link here on the screen, asoulfulspace.com/sheisme, to get access to that meditation and to stay connected with me and my work. And wherever your spiral path is leading you today, however it is unfolding for you, May you know peace. I hope you're also learning to trust yourself, to trust life, and to be an honest and loving relationship with yourself and all of life unfolding. It's not always easy, and it's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much.